Hi everyone! I am here today to show you how to make this Jammy Pecan Streusel coffee cake, and I think this is one of my favorite things to do because A, it's pretty easy, B, it comes together really quickly, and C, people really like it, and it's kind of customizable for your taste. So what else could you possibly want? Before you start baking, please make sure you check below in the tips to see if there's anything I need to tell you that I forgot to tell you in the video. That's where I'm going to put it. So enjoy and happy baking. Here's what we are going to be using both ingredient wise and equipment wise to make this coffee cake. Number one, we are using the mixer with a paddle attachment. If you don't have a paddle attachment, that's okay. You can do this in a large bowl with just a big spoon. You'll be fine and it'll work no problem. You want a 9x13 pan that you have greased. You could do this either using a baking spray or just butter it well and then dust a little bit of flour over it. It'll just keep the coffee cake from sticking, so when you go to serve it, it's going to be easy to take out nice pieces without having anything still stuck on the bottom. You're going to want a relatively large bowl, unless you're mixing it all up by hand, in which case you probably want a bigger one in addition to this bowl. A whisk, a knife, a spoon, which is just out of my reach right now, and that's it for equipment. Let's go through ingredients. 2 cups of flour. Now, you know, measure your flour so it's fluffy. If you don't remember how to do that, check out my bacon and cheddar scone video. I tell you all about how to make sure that that happens. 1 cup of sugar divided in half. So I've got half a cup here, 1 cup total, but we're going to use them separately. 3/4 of a cup of plain yogurt. If you don't have plain, if you have vanilla or some kind of fruit flavored yogurt, you could use that, especially if the fruit coordinates with whatever jam you're going to be using in this recipe. It might be great, but those yogurts have a lot of sugar in them. At least some of them do. So you are probably going to want to cut back on the sugar in the recipe if you do that. In here I have almost 2 eggs. Yuck. And a teaspoon of vanilla. Here I have half a stick of softened butter. You can see that's pretty soft. I can stick my finger right in there. 1 teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt. Okay, then we're going to take the other half of that stick of butter and melt it. So half a stick of melted butter. 1 stick of butter total, half a stick is melted, half a stick is just softened. And then 1 cup of brown sugar. And brown sugar is the opposite of flour. You know, flour, when you measure it, you want it to be all light and fluffy and airy and not packed down. Brown sugar, when you measure brown sugar, you want to pack it down like you're building a sandcastle. You could see that this has even retained the shape of the measuring cup that I used. So 1 cup of that. 3/4 of a cup of toasted pecans. If you don't have pecans, walnuts are also really good in this. When I toast my pecans, I just put them on a dry pan on the stove on medium heat, let them warm up a little bit. As soon as they start warming up, you want to stand right there next to it and keep kind of tossing them around. And you know that they're toasted enough when you can smell like a nice, rich pecan-y flavor or smell or walnutty scent. And when you measure them, make sure you measure them chopped, right? So chop them first and then measure 3/4 of a cup. My 3/4 of a cup chopped was almost a full cup of the whole pecan halves. We're going to need another teaspoon of vanilla for a little bit later, and then some kind of preserves of your choice. I like preserves for this because it's got those sections where the fruit is a little chunkier. If you don't have preserves, that's okay too. You can use a jam, whatever flavor you really like. My favorite for this is cherry, but strawberry is really good, blueberry is really good. Just pick whatever you like. I have today half and half because I'm using up some of the jams that have been in my fridge. So I've got half cherry, 1/3 of a cup of cherry, 1/3 of a cup of strawberry, 2/3 of a cup total. I might not end up using the whole thing, but I might. So this is a pretty good average of what I typically use for this recipe. One more note about your jam. If you're scooping it out to measure it and you notice it's thick and holding together in globs, you're going to want to give it a good vigorous stir because you're going to want it to move. We're going to swirl this a little bit through the coffee cake, and if it just stays in a big clump, someone eventually is going to end up with just a mouthful of jam. Some people might love that, but I don't think it's what we're going for here with this recipe. Okay. First thing we are going to do is take our big bowl and get some of this egg out of the way. Yuck, I can't believe I did that. And in this bowl, here's what we are going to add. We're going to add all of our flour. We are going to add half of our sugar, so half a cup of sugar. Our baking powder, make sure you get all of it. Our baking soda, and our salt. Now we're just going to give this a good whisk around or a good stir with a spoon. You just want to make sure that all those those ingredients that we have just a little amount of, like the baking powder and the baking soda, that they're all distributed throughout the flour. Okay, and once you have done this, keep your 1 cup measure, because we're going to need that, and we are just going to fill this cup up with 1 cup of this mixture, and just put this in a bowl and set it aside. Just forget about it for now. We'll get to it again later. But okay, so now we're going to the mixer. First thing we're going to put in the mixer is our butter and the other half of our sugar. And start this up, and you're just going to let this mix until those are combined and looking a little fluffy. And take a look in there. If you've got butter that's kind of stuck up on the sides of the bowl, use a spatula and just knock it back all in there. And keep it going. It should only take a minute or two. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Next, we're going to add our 2 eggs and vanilla. And really let this go. So another 2-3 minutes. You want this to really be well combined and look like a very smooth mixture. You don't want it to look like it has eggy bits and buttery bits. You want it to all look smooth and cohesive and all the same. And my butter keeps sneaking up the sides today, so I'm just going to pop that back down in there again. high speed on this because there's not that much in there. It's not going to come flying out unless something goes crazy. All right, that's looking good now. So now we're going to start adding some more ingredients in here. So we have done the sugar and the butter and the eggs and the vanilla. So next we are going to add our yogurt. And we're going to do the same thing, just let it mix around until it all looks like it's a cohesive mixture. Get it all in there. Whoops. There we go. A little speck hit me in the nose. Maybe don't go so fast with the yogurt, it's wet. Okay, so this right now is going to be pretty wet because most of the ingredients we've put in here are wet, right? Butter, once that gets beaten down, that's pretty wet. Yogurt, eggs, wet, 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 wet. But now we are going to add our final ingredients as the rest of this dry stuff. So we're going to put like half of this in at a time. And you know, to make this easier, I'm going to put this bowl down and get this beater a little bit out of my way. Okay. Back up. On a little bit slowly to kind of work that in and get it wet. And as soon as it's wet, shut it down and add the rest. You don't want to beat this with the flour for too long because, you know, we don't want those glutens to develop. We're not making a bread here. We're making a cake. So we want it to be a little more tender. And actually, for this particular recipe, if you have cake flour at home, you can go ahead and use that. It's got less protein in it and it develops less gluten, which is why it's good for cake. And since that's what we're making today, that would be a good option for you if you have it. All right, and as soon as that all comes together, we're done with that bit. So now we're going to do the second part. Actually, what are we gonna do? Yeah, let's do the second part. In this bowl, hopefully you kept it handy, we're going to add that 1 cup of flour mixture that we reserved. Get that right in there. Our pecans, our brown sugar. Let's break that up a little bit. Our vanilla, we're going to add 1 teaspoon. I'm just going to eyeball it because I'm a rebel that way, but you can measure if you want to. Okay. And our half a stick of melted butter. If you're working fast, it should still be melted. If it's not still melted, that's cool. Just remelt it. Pop it in the microwave for a few seconds. And we're just going to mix this all together until you don't see any white. See how this looks really still white and floury right now? As you continue to mix it, you might think, oh my gosh, there's no way that with that little bit of butter that we are going to get all of that flour hydrated. But trust me, it's going to happen. So just keep stirring, stirring until you don't see, what we're going for is you don't want to see any more white. If you don't see white, that means that that flour has absorbed the butter and that's what's going to help it turn a little bit crispy when we put it on top of the coffee cake. Okay, and now put all that good stuff back in there. As you see, all kind of just this nice tan brown sugary color. So let's move this to the side. We're going to take our plate, or our 9x13 baking dish, and we are just going to pour this batter right into that dish. So let's get everything off the beater too, because we want as much cake as possible. Okay. Oh, I love using this mixing bowl because it's got a handle. It's so much easier than when I use just a regular bowl and I try to hold it up with one hand to scrape things out of it. Okay. And just scrape it all out of the mixing bowl. And then all you want to do is spread that evenly across the bottom of your baking dish. And you're going to think, oh my gosh, it doesn't really look like there's that much here. And it's because there isn't, but trust me, it all comes together in the end. You know, it's a coffee cake. You're not making a giant multi-layer, big, fluffy cake. It's going to be a flat little coffee cake, but it's going to be good. Okay, and make sure you get up into those corners too. Okay, when that looks all good, this can be put aside. Then we are going to take our jam, and I should have a spoon for this, but I'm just going to do it with this. And take little clumps of it and just make globs all over the top. You know, you want to have some space in between them, but you want them evenly spaced out because you want every piece you cut to have some of that really nice fruity jam in there. Because after all, this is the Jammy Pecan Streusel coffee cake. If you wanted to do just a pecan streusel coffee cake and skip the jam entirely, you could do that. It's still really good, but you'd have to call it something else. Okay, so I am doing the strawberry on one side and the cherry on the other side, but if you want to go wild and just do random, if you're doing multiple flavors, if you just want to do random flavors all over the place and it's kind of a surprise what you're gonna get, I love that idea too. Because if you can't be surprised, if you can't enjoy a surprise with coffee cake, that's not right. You should. And maybe I'll do that too. Maybe I'll have just a couple globs of this cherry over here on the strawberry side, and hopefully someone will really enjoy that. Okay, so I used pretty much exactly those 2/3 of a cup, and this is how it looks. I don't want to tip it for too long because I don't want it to all move. But you see there's still a lot of space in between there. And then I'm going to take this pecan streusel topping that we mixed up and just sprinkle it over the entire top. Make sure you do an even coating, right? So if you think, don't worry about getting it too heavy in one spot. Just make sure you get it all over first. And then if you still have some extra, you could go in and fill in spots where you see a little cake peeking out. Don't forget the corners with this too. A lot of times, especially if you're sprinkling something over the top, those corners are neglected. And the person who gets that corner piece is not going to be happy with you. Okay. And the last step, take your knife, and we're just going to run it back and forth every couple inches across the whole surface of, not just the surface, it's going to go down to the bottom. And once it hits the bottom, just drag it across. Do a turn, drag it across. Come over like an inch or two, drag it across. I'm probably going every inch, inch and a half. And just drag through it. And that's just ensuring that your jam kind of will create a swirl and go through all parts of the coffee cake. Now I'm going to put this in the oven. Well, I'm going to wipe the little bit of egg that I spilled on the counter off first. Then I'm going to put it in my 350-degree oven for half an hour. And when I see you again, we should be looking at a pretty good looking coffee cake. And here it is. This was in my oven for 30 minutes. Now I know that this recipe works in my oven when my oven's set at 350 for 30 minutes. But not all ovens are exactly the same. So what I do recommend is when you are baking this, check it at about 25 minutes and then see what you have to do. If it's not baked yet, you could keep going for another 5 minutes. If it's still not baked, keep going. And eventually you'll kind of get to know your oven and your recipes, and you won't have to check frequently. You can just let it go. The next question you might be asking is, how do I know if it's baked? I mean, look at that. It's all weird and lumpy and it looks brown, but it started off looking brown. Toothpicks are your best friend with any kind of cake. And for this cake, I recommend when you go to check it, you have more than one toothpick on hand. You want to poke it somewhere in the middle section of the cake. If your toothpick comes out clean and dry, then you know it's baked all the way through. If you poke it all the way down to the bottom and pull it out and there's a lot of batter still stuck to it, or if it's, you know, a little bit gooey, you probably want to keep baking it a little bit longer. So why do you need more than one toothpick? Well, don't forget we have a lot of jam in this cake. And since we've got jam in here, you might poke a spot that ends up being really gooey and sticky just because you hit a jam pocket. But if you want to reduce your chances of that, take a look at this cake. You could see these lighter areas where just the batter is poking through. So since I've got a couple of these towards the center, this is where I checked it. Because if your batter is popping up all the way to the top, chances are there's no jam in that area. Okay, so here's the final test. How does it look and how does it taste? Let's check it out. It doesn't usually come out this easily. I just pre-cut it. But then check this out. Nice cakey layer, nice swirl of jam through there, delicious, crispy, crumbly streusel on top. So I'm gonna go enjoy that. I hope you have enjoyed watching this video. If you make this coffee cake, I hope you will love eating it. And if you did like it, click like below and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any other ones, and share it with your friends because I'd love to share this recipe with as many people as possible. So enjoy, have a great day. Thanks for coming. Bye.